couple of weeks ago, a developer kindly sent me a Steam key for a game they thought I might enjoy. Iron Roads. I don't know why I'm being mysterious saying a game. It's there, it's in the title, it's pretty easy to figure out. I mean, maybe it's gone to my head that, you know, this is the big time, isn't it? Free Steam keys. It's only a short road from there to me shilling out for VPNs, website hosting companies, and some sort of coupon platform which defrauds me of my affiliate earnings and doesn't save you any money. Hang on, I don't even have an affiliate scheme. I'm really not doing this sellout thing properly. But before we sell out, let's try a game which looks like it ticks many of my, yes, I enjoy this sort of thing, boxes. The developers in question are California Studios, based in Oxford. And yes, if you know the UK, you'll know exactly which bit of Oxford. The two-person team of Marina and Duncan talk about trying to hit a blend between the accessibility of Mini-Metro and the depth of OpenTTD. But the first reference which hit in my mind on looking through the screenshots as I downloaded it was Railroad Tycoon. Having lost many hours of my life to the doesn't look really like this Railroad Tycoon 2, I jumped into the tutorial and started laying out tracks. Single track platforms, because that's all I could afford with my limited number of platform tokens. I'll get to those tokens in a bit. And double track sections for trains to pass. And this all worked nicely, and seemingly automatically, as it would in Railroad Tycoon, until a few objectives into the tutorial, I got a notification that my trains were stuck. Right, yeah, let's click that handy unstick button and realise that there is routing complexity here. Iron Roads does not have signals, and this is a deliberate decision. You don't have to read the OpenTTD Reddit for long to realise how confusing players who are new to transport games find signalling. But what Iron Roads does have are one-way zones and non-stopping zones, and now I start to use them, I get that Transport Tycoon influence. The one-way sections are fairly obvious. The non-stopping zones act similar to block signals, in that only one train can be in the section at a time. These also introduce you to the game's research system. Almost everything you want to use in game has to be researched. Early researches, such as the one-way systems, only require spending a few rail tokens, but later researches will require you to amass resources, such as concrete. Right, yeah, the game calls it cement. You'd think with only 5 types of token I might remember the names of all of them for long enough to write a script, but apparently not. Still, it's fine. At least I caught it before editing, so I can just re-record it in the final video and nobody will ever need to know. These later resources are produced at factories spread across the map, which are unlocked as you research each production concept, each of which will require resources from a certain town or other factory. The simpler ones, such as concrete, are a simple case of connecting the correct worker resting site to the correct industry. But once you get to power, you need both workers and resources from the nearby mine, and workers for that mine. Connecting each of these requires a platform, and platforms are one of the game's more limited varieties of token. Ah, yes, tokens. A version or two before I started playing, money was removed from Iron Roads and replaced with an economy based around spending special types of token. Kind of like a fun fair, but with fewer sketchily maintained wild mouse rides. Laying rail only requires the simple and plentiful rail tokens, which are regularly awarded as you grow the towns on the map by providing services. But adding long bridges or large stations requires concrete. Yes, this resource. And every new platform requires a platform token, which are often in short supply. Even with a few types of token introduced, this is still the casual experience you'd expect from the storyline where cute animals inherit the earth and start following nature's strongest instinct, the desire for trains. You're always refunded the same amount of tokens you spent if you decide something was a mistake, and even a basic network will grow towns and earn more tokens over time in the early game. At first, I found myself treating Iron Roads almost as a sort of idle game, although that's mainly because the dogs wanted to go out in the garden, and then, well, chaos happened. By the time I got back to the computer, I'd earned my first star, despite not having done so much as wiggle a mouse pointer for the last 10 minutes. That stage does not last forever. Once you start creating power tokens and research the game's first externally powered train, worthwhile as by this point your stations will be complaining that their slow services are taking an age to arrive, and that train is a big speed upgrade, You will also find that powered trains consume power tokens to operate at those pleasingly zippy rates. A few minutes into replacing all of my antiquated Hephaestus trains with the new Creus model, I noticed that my power was down to 30 tokens and dropping fast. Thus followed a desperate attempt to grow the power station worker town and get more production at the mine, in the hope I could outpace my excessive power consumption before power tokens dropped to zero and everything fell apart. Averting catastrophe did require selling a couple of trains on a route that didn't really need the speed. Again, you're not penalised for making mistakes as you get back all the tokens you spent when you sell a train. But other than a few nail-biting moments of power dropping to just 9 tokens left, I was able to keep the lines full of juice until the economic situation improved. And by this point, that tutorial had gone from a simple test to see whether I could connect 2 towns into giving me a feast of objectives and contracts, some of which presented a decent amount of challenge. As my collection of trains built up, they started to reveal the game's soundtrack. Early beeps and boops to signify each passenger boarding a train joined together, until they're a part procedural, part composed soundtrack. And that casual introduction had turned into something satisfyingly complex too. Keeping all of the towns in the green with no late arrivals or long waiting times is tough when you have passengers travelling across the map on multiple interconnected services, and an objective to connect 2 distant towns with progressively faster journey times had me replacing my early tracks with constructions that could have been straight out of OpenTTD. Tunnels under tracks to avoid trains with conflicting paths and high capacity roll-on, roll-off stations. Yeah, don't let those cute animals and the dogs of Trembley Stadium fool you. This is gonna make you think. Now, I did find myself wishing every so often for an easy way to unbunch trains on a route. It's not uncommon when reworking track to end up sending all of your trains back to their origin station, and then watch them travel around nose to tail, while the station at the other end of the line complains it hasn't seen a train in so long, it's kind of forgotten what they are. And just what are trains? Moving to the second scenario in the early test version I was given, unlocked a much larger map and a complex industry chain reminiscent of something out of furs, the perfume industry, which requires sand to make bottles which are then filled with flowers, all of which require various animal workers to be transported from their respective towns to their respective factories. And, of course, connecting those towns will generate passengers to all the other towns on the map. And soon you're trying to optimise journey times between 2 towns you never expected to be connected at this point. This scenario also introduced a new train with a unique gimmick. Slow when travelling on the surface, but once placed in a tunnel, it would accelerate to utterly ludicrous speeds. This turned track building on its head, as now I was looking not for well-designed and well-spaced junctions, but for unbroken straight sections that would allow me to build long enough tunnels that the Persephone could spend as much time as possible at full speed. Messing about with underground services might have been fun, but as I tried to connect all of the perfume prerequisites, I started to bump into the game's resource system in a less fortunate way. While growing towns will grant you additional platforms and track tokens, as they grow further, these rewards diminish. This forces you to connect additional towns, but with a network involving multiple destinations, it's much harder to keep those town badges green, as passengers who've had to change multiple times complain about arriving late. On this larger level, it's easy to end up in a situation where you don't have any track left to improve things, but without the ability to improve things, you're also not getting any more track. And I realised something at this point. California Studios list Mini Metro as another big inspiration, and after exploring it, I find Iron Roads as much of a puzzle game as it is a more conventional transport 'em up. When things have gone wrong and your network is a hopelessly inefficient use of resources, there is nothing to stop you ripping up every last piece of track and starting afresh with a new approach, without having to earn all those tokens again playing through the scenario from the start. Now in Transport Tycoon, that would punish you for this, because there is no way you're getting all that money you invested back, especially if you did a lot of terraforming along the way. But Iron Roads? No, Iron Road will happily give you all of your concrete platforms and rails back. Well, it's not going to give you your concrete back on account of that not being a thing which exists in the game. But you will be put back to a point where you can build anew, and hopefully get it right this time. Do I like this playstyle? I'm not sure. See, my default approach in this sort of game is to spaghetti my way out of the mess I've created with an array of Bodge wires and hopelessly over-engineered contraptions built on load-bearing nonsense. I'm not sure now I say that way out of the mess is the right phrase there. I almost wanted some way to have a steady flow of track token income once my network was established, rather than having to rethink my designs and come up with something actually good. But that is a me problem. I find myself thinking here of the variety of rollercoaster tycoon scenarios. If you were one of the people who had the most fun with scenarios like Micropark or Urban Park, which were about solving specific puzzles in an optimal way, this is absolutely the game for you. Especially if you've ever found yourself playing a multiplayer game of OpenTTD and been frustrated by how building a perfectly optimised and balanced network can be easily matched by a player who just bludgeons the map into submission with point-to-point routes, sociopathic corner radiuses and an army of ships. And that's not to say I don't enjoy this change in gameplay approach. I might fill my Factorio maps with more spaghetti than a Barilla warehouse, but I still love figuring out blueprints to take up minimal space and produce items in near-perfect ratios. That puzzle element, and also perhaps those mini-metro comparisons, come across best in the challenge mode. Small, constrained scenarios where your goal is to transport as many passengers as possible in a fixed amount of time. This means you need to concentrate on using your limited supply of track tokens to connect as many towns as possible, and keep them all happy so they expand. The more expansion, the more passengers available to transport, and so the higher your score. This is where I think the developer's desire to blend accessibility and depth comes across most strongly. Because you can absolutely just drop some track, place some trains and see the score go up. But getting near those top weekly scores requires engaging fully with the one-way and no stopping zone system, figuring out smart junctions and efficient station designs, and understanding how to diagnose why passengers are waiting and where late trains are coming from. The challenges I've played so far have been quick enough that whenever I complete one, I feel ready to try again to see if a different network layout or strategy can increase the number of passengers delivered. It's the kind of optimization problem you sometimes have to play a long way into games like Transport Tycoon to get a big enough network to encounter. So being able to tickle that corner of my brain with only a couple of minutes setup is pleasing. And there's a lot of promise here. If you want to check it out, there is a demo version, and the game proper releases into general early access on the 20th January 2025. Or released into early access, or possibly the event happens between me recording this and the 20th January. Kind of hope the event doesn't happen because California Studios promise further development over the early access period, with more scenarios, added complexities such as weather events, and rewarding players for building networks more in tune with the local environment. No more bulldozing all the fields around a farm with no consequences other than a slightly dented bank balance, the way you can in OpenTTD. And I've certainly enjoyed the several hours I've already spent playing it enough to look forward to that early access period and all the new development which will come as a part of it. Now, I'm off to completely sell out. Oh, you knew that was coming, didn't you? Okay, take one. I love the way that as soon as you turn the camera on, like all of the words go out of your head. You have no idea how to talk about anything.